So let me introduce myself on our live stream here, and then I'm going to switch us back. Maybe we have been live streaming. I don't know. We'll see. If so, we'll take out the names at the beginning, guys. So hello to anybody who is there, hi. So hello to anybody who is live streaming with us. If you're with us today, this is the 9-Day Novella, and I'm Sandy Vasher, and we're going to get right into it because we've got stuff to do today, and I've got people here who are writing with me. So if you're joining us virtually, thank you, and let's talk about what we're here for today. So I'm going to turn our lights so that you guys can see some things, and just give you like a brief. No, okay, good. Sort of look at like what we're doing today. So my sort of vision for today is like our intro, which we just did, and some level setting, because I think people come into workshops like this with a lot of different levels in terms of like thinking about marketing and publishing and writing, and it's good to just make sure we're all on the same page. We need to make sure we all have chosen genres and subgenres by the end of the day. We've got some pre-work to get done, and I've got some tips for if you are a planner, a planter, or a pantser. So if you came in with nothing, that's fine. If you came in with everything, that's fine. Either way, hopefully you leave today with like all of the prep that you need done. And if you are joining us online, what's this? Something weird happened. And if you are joining us online, then hopefully you will also walk away with something. But you're only going to get the half an hour presentation here, so you'll have to do the work at home. It's really weird to live stream like that. Okay. So let's talk about what we're not here for and what we are here for. So the 9-Day Novella is specifically one really good way to build an author platform. And I know that like sometimes in a writer workshop, people spend a lot of time talking about craft. Other than today, I am probably not going to spend much time talking about craft. I'm going to assume that you're writers, you already know how to write, but that what you might not know how to do is get your stuff done. So like it's not about being able to write the words or the stories or the creative nonfiction. It's about actually like finishing it in like a short period of time. So our goal is to take you from blank page to like available to publish on Amazon in 9 days, because that's what I need to do over the next 9 days, and I need company. So that's my other purpose here, is to share motivation. I write with the Raleigh Pub Writers, which is an awesome group. Sometimes we get a little overly social in the pub writer group. When you are doing a novella in like 9 days, you really don't have time for social. So I hope that we're all friends at the end of this and that it's like not bad, right? But like realistically, we don't have time to do stuff like critique each other's stories or beta read or really like, chat during like the writing sessions. So like especially the next 3 days as we're writing, like those have to be seriously focused days, because you've got basically 3 days that you need to write your entire 9-day novella in, or at least get a draft done. So pretty important to make sure that we're like all on task. And then, so as far as like the plan goes, if you are joining me today, I have a little checklist that I gave you all. So it looks like this. It's like the curled piece of paper because it's so humid in North Carolina today. So you don't have to go through the whole thing right now. I will walk you through it each day. But essentially, like the way that I do this is I spend the first day planning. I don't do any writing today. This is all planning. So it's like thinking about characters, maybe outlining, maybe writing a blurb, doing all the stuff that I'm going to do with you guys. I don't write until tomorrow. The reason I don't write until tomorrow is because I think it's important to let ideas like percolate so that you're excited to write. So like you come in tomorrow like ready to roll. And then, so that being said, days 2 through 4 are drafting. So like I have allocated 3 days of the 9-day session to just getting your first draft done. It has to be a pretty clean draft. So like, you know how they say like everybody writes a shitty first draft? Mm-hmm. Your first draft can be, it can be, right. But the thing is, if you want to be able to publish it in 9 days, you at least have to make it like readable. So this is the time when like you don't want to just write words for the sake of words. Like we want the words to make sense and for you to feel like at the end of the 3 days that you have a story that's at least like editable, and that doesn't require major revision. We'll give ourselves a brain break on day 5. So day 5, we'll talk about title and cover and blurb. So we'll switch to like marketing stuff just to give your eyes a rest, right? And sort of like do some more creative, like I think that's right brain stuff. That's still important. And then days 6 through 7 is when we'll get back to revising and editing, proofreading on day 8. And on day 9, I'm going to walk you through how you create an ebook or an EPUB and how you actually like get it up onto sites like BookFunnel, which we'll talk about in a second. So any questions so far? Yeah, no? Okay. So then for our like level setting, so I know, so Joanne, you said you're indie published. Patricia, are you published? Yes. Self-published. Same, right? Like, is anybody here traditionally published? No? Okay, so we're all indie publishers, right? So then I probably don't have to spend a ton of time on sort of like my first point here, which is like I think what nobody tells beginners is like that there's only really sort of like 2 ways to succeed as a writer. And like way 1 is you can get like damn super lucky, right? So like you can, I don't know, win the lotto and get an amazing agent and get a 6-figure contract and have Oprah read your book the first week that it's out. And like maybe if you do that, then you end up with so much publicity that like you don't need to do any of the stuff that we're going to talk about. But I you know, even for people who are traditionally published, the other only real way to make writing work as like a vocation is to like think of it as a small business. So you got to think of your writing as a product that needs to go out to customers and needs to be in their hands like all of the time. And you need to be in front of them all of the time. So like you aren't just a writer if you want your stuff to sell, and presumably you guys all want your stuff to sell. You're a writer-preneur, right? So like it's not just good enough to finish that book. You got to get into the hands of readers. And I know, you know, like it's great if you are the kind of person who writes for love, right? So like if this is a hobby and you would just do it no matter what, wonderful. But I don't know about you guys. For me, the time investment in something like this is so high. I don't want to put it in if I'm not going to feel like I can get something out. So for me, it's important to think about this in terms of like marketing and promotion and what I have to do to write to a market. So that being said, I mean, of course, like some people still want publishing deals. So if you're, you know, joining us online and you are not an indie publisher, maybe you do want that traditional publishing deal. And I thought it was worth sort of like not bad-mouthing the traditional publishers, because look, like if Simon & Schuster calls me tomorrow and says like, hey, I loved that novella, I'm definitely going to talk to them. But traditional publishing has normally been like you have to have an agent. The agent gets you a contract with the traditional publisher. The traditional publisher then is going to pay you like in advance, maybe, and then royalties. You know, this is a dream, I think, for a lot of writers, but nowadays there are some more risks to it than you would think. So, you know, it used to be that you would be better respected and better paid and get like more marketing support, and maybe like a traditional publisher would help you out a little bit, like getting your books into places. And for sure, like you want your books on like the Barnes and Noble shelf, you probably need a traditional publisher to at some point, because they have access to resources. So like print on demand, which is what most self-publishers do, is expensive. So basically your costs are expensive. Question?
You could get it, but it's a cost.
Yes. Yeah.
Get it on the shelves.
And
if you're not making any money,
right.
you know, it's like you're paying for the shelf life and you're not making any money, so.
Or potentially you're losing money, right?
Yeah, you will be, I mean, well,
Yeah.
for myself, I haven't recouped any of the money I could in my first book.
And it's frustrating because like you write all this stuff, right, and then you maybe like get it onto a shelf, and then like it actually costs you more to get the book printed than it did to sell the book, which is so frustrating. And that's like outside of the thousands of hours that you probably spend on your writing.
But it was a passion of mine, so I needed to get out there. So
you had to do it.
Reason why
Fair enough. But you know, like I think the thing is like for me, self-publishing is the only. I don't know. Like maybe if I'd had an agent, I would feel differently, right? But I feel like there's a major hazard if you are a traditional published person too, because like yeah, sure you have these resources and there's like a printing house behind you and maybe your costs are less, but if you don't sell your stuff, so like you know if somehow your stuff like gets out on the shelves of the Barnes and Noble and like people don't buy it and you don't meet your sales targets, you could get dropped by your traditional publisher because they got to make money. So like then what does that do to you as a writer? I mean, hopefully you keep writing, right? And you like, you know, continue to work. But I think it's much harder then to find that publisher if like somebody knows that you've been dropped because your books aren't selling. So, you know, the alternative to this is our self-publishing and, you know, Amazon KDP being sort of like the main way to do this, although there are others. And you know, obviously, like with self-publishing, you handle everything. So now you're writing and editing and doing the cover and doing the marketing and like handling all the promotion, and it is all on you, which means it's on you to either hire those things out or do it yourself. I think a lot of people used to see self-publishing as like, oh, like somebody just like, you know, put a book up on the internet. But most self-publishers today work really hard to make their books look pretty professional. So like, we're not talking about like your, you know, aunt's like recipe book or something that got like put up on the internet for the family. Like now self-publishers work real hard to make their books look the same as traditionally published books. And there's a lot of benefits to this. So like specifically you have total creative control, and if your project goes badly, you just try again. Like you can get a pen name, so there's lots of options for you. And actually, so like today, self-publishers tend to make more money if they're successful than traditionally published authors. I think this is because self-publishers have to think early about the author platform. All right, so stopping on the author platform. Have you guys heard this term, author platform? Yeah, like
you have to build a platform.
Yeah. So people are
actually publishers won't even consider you unless
yes.
you have a platform.
Oh, very good point. Regardless of what you want, you got to have a platform, right? Like a traditional publisher isn't gonna, they want you to have this. And so here's the frustrating thing is like agents at conferences will say like, oh, build your platform yesterday, but they won't tell you what that is or how. So there is no instruction. There's only like, you must have this. We're not going to sign you unless you have it. Mm-hmm. And oh, by the way, we have no idea how to tell you how to do it. And I think that's part of why self-publishers, right?
It's like a lot of things in American life.
Yeah. But it is. I mean, it's not actually that mysterious, and it turns out that like your platform is basically just like the vehicle that you use to launch your book. So I actually thought. I never really thought about this way before, but I think a train platform is the best way to think about this. You need a place from which to launch those books, right? Like they got to go off on tracks somewhere, and like your platform is the different tracks or the different ways that you have to sell books. Now, as far as like what makes this successful, so you need your author platform to basically do three things. So you need it to give your readers a way to find you, right? Like they've got to figure out who you are, because if your readers don't find you, then they can't read your books. Second, it has to show your readers who you are. So like they have to find you based on it. And then you have to have some content that actually says like, this is who I am. And then third, you got to be able to drive sales. So like it's not good enough if they just find you and like you. You also have to be able to like reach out to them and say, hey, I've got this new book. Do you want to buy it? And that is important because it helps us think about like what's effective and what's ineffective. I I know a lot of people feel like things like Twitter is very effective. Most Twittery social media requires a whole hell of a lot of work for a relatively low return. So like, you put a lot into getting those followers, and then you can't directly reach out to them in order to get them to buy your book. It is also true that if you're doing things like selling at comic book conventions, selling to family and friends, like selling on street corners, whatever you're selling, like your audience is limited and you've got to go to them like physically, which is not practical for most self-publishers given how much you actually need to do, right? Because like for us, we need our books out all of the time. Like you need...
First thing they ask you.
Yes.
Where can I buy your book?
Yes, yeah, and you need people to know where to find it, but you also, like, you can't be constantly going to people. You don't have that time because you got to write your books. So effective platforms are going to have attractive content such as a reader magnet, which we'll talk about in a second, maybe like a blog or a podcast if it is high traffic, and then a robust email subscriber list. Super weird.
Was it on a timer?
It must be. Must be on a timer. I promise we won't sit in the dark the entire time.
But I didn't feel like it was fair to have you look at any of this without like making sure we all know where we're coming from. So a subscriber list, right? And then consistency with the subscriber list. The subscriber list is especially interesting. So like this is the one tool that you don't realize is really super important and that you might think of as like annoying to begin with. So I know, at least for me, when I first started thinking about self-publishing and like people who had done this were saying things like, I can get you those slides if you want. And people were saying things like, oh, your email subscriber list is so important. I was thinking, yeah, but that's annoying, right? Like, I don't want to be one of those people sending out those like obnoxious emails that I'm constantly unsubscribing from. You got to just kick that. Like, your email list is the most important way for you to get to readers, and it's the best way for you to do it because you own that list and like you can reach out to them easily, right? So like you can send an email and reach like thousands of people in a couple of minutes and say, hey, here's my book, and you don't have to like wait for them to come to your blog or for them to come to your Instagram or for them to come to your Twitter. You go to them and you do it in like an instant because it's digital. So in order to get that like sort of reader magnet email subscriber thing set up, we need a process that works, right? And at least based on my experience so far, which is limited, okay? So like I'm sharing with you what I have learned over the last like year or so of kind of intense work in this. And there are certainly other ways, but from what I can tell so far, you need a process where readers learn where to go. You have content that then attracts those readers to you. You put the content where your readers are. You collect email addresses from new readers. Digital technology fail. You follow up with anybody who reads. And then you repeat it over and over and over again. So like we basically want that process. So I'm just going to do a little more lingo and then ask if you guys have questions. So I think this is probably the most like important thing for us all to be on the same page with. So subscriber list, when I say it, I mean your email list. So this is like the collection of emails that you have. If you don't already have a MailerLite account or a MailChimp account, you probably need one. So that's a good thing to get set up when you're done like thinking about today or maybe even during today. I can show you what mine looks like. This is where you keep all those addresses. Newsletters. So the newsletters, when we talk about newsletters, and sometimes they're abbreviated NL in forums. So subscriber list SL, newsletters NL. Newsletters don't mean physical newsletters. They mean those emails that go out on a regular basis, at least once a month, sometimes more often. Reader magnets. So when we say reader magnet, we're talking about a short story or a novella that you put up on like a promo site, and this is meant to get people to get to know you. So like You put it out there for folks to read, and they like read it, and then ideally that is the content that they use to get to know you so that they want to come back for more. Group promos. So the place that you put your reader magnets are in group promotions, and I will show you these like as we go through the process, but essentially like a group promotion means like you join up with other indie authors who are also promoting their stuff, and when you join up, like you say to them, hey, I've got a new book coming up, do you want to swap? Or you join like a whole group promotion where say 30 authors are going to put their books into one little like advertising scheme, and you're all going to then put that in your newsletter so that like anybody who gets my newsletter and who also gets all of your newsletters get all of our books at once. So we basically like, quadruple our mailer list if we're working together like that. And that'll be a little bit easier to understand once you start looking at BookFunnel and Prolific Works and Story Origin, which are all like online communities that you can go to like get involved in these group promotions. So this is where you find these things and how you actually like get hooked up with them. Any questions so far? Is this stuff you guys already know? Yeah,
no,
go ahead.
It isn't.
No.
Do you know how many people roughly have stuff on Amazon, and what, not even, or even what a percentage is, what's considered successful on Amazon, or how many books do you have to sell, or any of the numbers stuff? 'Cause I don't know anything about it really.
Yeah, so the question, if you're online, is what numbers are there? It's like, what do you got to sell to be successful on Amazon? So I think this depends on like how expensive your books are, and what the market is willing to sustain in terms of costs. I don't know those numbers myself, but I do know that like your royalty from any given book is going to be a few cents, right? So we're talking, like maybe, I have a novella out that I sold 8 copies of this week. I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, that's more.
Yeah, it is great, right? And I think I made $14 off of those 8 novellas, which is good because that was actually like a $2.99 priced book, and I'm getting a 70% royalty. That is the power of Amazon and self-publishing, by the way. But like there are different royalty schemes. So like Amazon, for example, will give you a 70% royalty at certain price points if you allow things like lending, but they'll only give you a 35% royalty if you're like below a certain price point, or if you don't want to allow lending. So like what you make depends on sort of a lot of things that you tell these like different print on demand services like Amazon Kindle. I do know, so like the best group that I'm in terms of marketing is called 20 Books to 50K. It's a Facebook group. And they constantly have people coming on and like sort of showing what success they've had, where like you can see like this is what their sales look like. And usually those posts, like the people who write them will write like, this is the number of books that I have, this is like what I did to get here, this is like how many it took. The theory behind 20 Books to 50K is that you've got to have 20 books out there before you can make 50K, right? So like if you were to have 20 books and you were selling a copy a day, then you would potentially be making $50,000 a year. Self-publishing is the only place, by the way, where you're ever going to get any writer who says to you, yeah, it is possible to make money. Like in no other context will anybody say that, because in the traditional publishing world, there's so much luck behind it. But I do know, I want to say that Jeff Bezos came out this year and said like 1,000 people, like 1,000 authors on Amazon are making over 100,000, and I want to say those are self-published authors. So, weirdly, we don't get reported on all of the like lists. So I don't think that self-published authors tend to be on, say, like the New York Times bestseller lists, or they're not necessarily included in every figure, but they're still making 6 figures in some cases. So I mean, I don't know. I think the idea of like 1,000 authors who are self-published making 6-figure salaries, like that's pretty good. So I'm sure they all have at least 20 books though.
That's interesting.
Right. And I would definitely join that marketing group, because I mean, there's no like right answer to any of this. So I mean, I'm sure there are statistics that are right, but like as far as any of us goes, I don't think there would be any one right answer to how many books you would need to publish in order to be making a salary. I think you'd have to look at like, who else in my genre is doing this? What are they doing? What am I doing that's similar? And sort of like, what is the time period doing? Because the internet changes everything, right? Like, I saw a great Pinterest marketing seminar today. Like, it never occurred to me to market my books on Pinterest, but it turns out that's a possibility. It might not be in like a year. So I think that changes things too. Other questions for now? Okay, so I will give you my little example that I'm proud of. I do think like for a lot of people, they start off thinking like blogs or podcasts are the way to go. I don't know about you guys. I find blogs and podcasting extremely time consuming, right? So like, you know, it can be 3 hours, 4 hours, an entire day to get a blog out, right? And we're talking about writing a novella in 9 days. So that's a very big chunk of time when it comes to like your writing time. So for me, reader magnets have been far more helpful. And so like to give you a sense of why I'm sharing this and encouraging it. So I think there's a lot of benefits, things like faster access to people who read your stories and like sort of good forums. And my example is I started off in January. So I published a book under my own name, like a YA book, and I sold it to I gave away like 80 free copies to my friends on Amazon. And then I sold like 30 copies. And then like my sales flatlined and I realized that I had no way to get my books to people. So I started a romance pen name on the grounds that I needed to figure out how to do this, right? And like maybe if I did it in a softer market, I'd be able to figure out some things. So my pen name had 0 friends in January, and I did not advertise it to like my regular Facebook friends. So like there are people who know, but like generally speaking, like that group of people that would have bought my YA novels, they are not aware that I'm writing romance. And I wrote a 25,000 word novella. So like I wrote it in like 2 weeks or something and put it up on one of these newsletter sites. And so I had no subscribers and no friends. And in February, I put it up. So I put it on BookFunnel and Prolific Works and Story Origin and Bookcave, which were the 4 places that I could find to put my stuff. Not all of these yielded the same result, so I'll tell you more about that as we go on. Yes.
I can't see.
Oh, it's too small.
Yeah.
BookFunnel, yes, and don't worry, I'll talk about it a lot. So yesterday I checked my subscriber list and I have over 1,800 subscribers now. So it's a fairly decent gain over the last year, right? Like I'm almost at 2,000 subscribers. I've written 2 novellas and 1 sort of shorter story. Mostly the novellas are the ones that attract people for me. I don't know why they don't like my longer stuff, but they love my novellas. So I am a big believer in the novella thing, and I think that it is surprising what that does for you. My YA thing. So now I've done this a little bit in romance, right? So I went back recently and wrote a young adult novella, same style. And in fact, I used the program that I'm doing with you guys to write it because I wanted to see if it was actually possible. And I did a 25,000 word YA novella and then put it up on these sites. Young adult is significantly more competitive than the romance market. So like any children's market is going to be harder to break into than say like a romance or a sci-fi where a lot of people are willing to read digital books. But I still, over the last like literally couple of days, have like doubled my subscriber list. So I'm at almost 200 subscribers now, which is 100 more people than I had like Monday. And I think that that's powerful, right? Like you don't realize it matters, I think, when you first start off doing this, but we need readers. And even if they're free readers to begin with, like anybody who's willing to leave you a review or like give you some support or let you email them is one more person that you have that will potentially buy your books or talk about them. Your reader magnets, right? Because this is kind of like the important part. We're going to go through like quite a few little things here today, and I'll give you a little preview here for our folks online, and then we can go through it a little bit more slowly. So we're going to want to be thinking about what should you write about. And for this, I encourage you to think about things like, what do you enjoy reading? What can the market support? And what can you write quickly? And what will your attention span like sustain for 3 days? Because I mean, if you're writing something fast and in 3 days, you got to be able to focus on it. And most writers are, let's say, a little ADHD, right? Like I know of no writers who have like no attention problems, which is weird because you'd think that we wouldn't have that issue, but no, like we have
to cut all distractions.
Totally, we got to cut it all off. So you want to think about that. I do think it's useful to learn how to write to market, meaning it's good to think about like, if you say write romance, then maybe you should learn to look into what's selling in romance. So like if cowboys are a big thing, and they were in 2019, then if you can learn how to write cowboys, then you're more likely to do well. Shifters were a thing this year. So this is being live cast on WordStitch, and if anybody else watches WordStitch or sees our Monday write-ins, my other WordStitch gal partner, Chloe, she writes erotica, and she's totally doing shifters right now, which is awesome because shifters are in. So like if you can learn how to do stuff like that, then that's really good for you. As far as like selecting genres, so I'm gonna leave this up here for a second for our online folks. For you guys in the room, I actually have a worksheet for you so you can like see it, and not have to look at it on this little tiny screen. I think it's really important when you think about a genre to think about what's going to sell. So like, I know like you may have come in with an idea of what you want to write. That's fine. If you have a story already and you're happy with it, then stay with it. But if you don't know, then I definitely encourage you to think about looking at tools like K-Lytics, or even just going on Amazon and taking a look at like what is selling in your category. So like you Amazon key search for something you might want to read and see what comes up, and like what the like top books are, and that'll give you a sense of what it is that people are actually buying right now. We're going to go through this in the group too. So in order to figure out how you want to do this and to prepare, I recommend that you figure out how to tell your story in a sentence. So in this group here, like once I finish our presentation, I'm going to be having you go through this stuff. And at this point, you want to write about a character and a problem. So in order to like help yourself prepare for tomorrow, you need to be able to basically fill in this sentence. And the sentence is in my genre subgenre, a novella, the first name of a character, a something, 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 wants to achieve some goal, but there's an obstacle that stands in their way. So like, that's all you got to do. And if you can get this far, then this will basically outline like the most important parts of your story. I know a lot of people get sort of hung up. Oh, here, I think I have there. You want this version? So I know a lot of people get hung up on like plot when it comes to like preparing for stories. It is definitely true that like over plotting makes it much harder to finish a story. So like if you have over plotted, then you don't get to be as creative quickly. And that's a problem for a 9-day novella, right? It's also true that readers read for characters, right? So like we don't read because we're interested in the plot, unless we're like real serious sci-fi people and we only care about the systems that the planets run on. Most readers are looking for a character they relate to and to see that character overcome a challenge. So like that is the biggest thing that you've got to do. Character that somebody can relate to, challenge that they can overcome. And then after that, we want to think about mechanics. So some of the things that we're going to be going through will be stuff like who are you going to tell your story from in terms of perspective. So you're going to want to pick 1 or 2 point of view characters. You're going to want to think about first person or third person. So are you telling the story in terms of like I saw the puppy wag its tail or he saw the puppy wag its tail. This is important in terms of like quickness. So you want to think about what you can do fast. If you write first person better, then you want to do that. If you write third person better, and I mean better in terms of faster in this case, then you write third person. And then also verb tense. So you want to decide ahead of time, are you doing present or past? And all of this will make it easier so that you don't then later have to go back and redo everything, right? Because that's a pain, you know? Like you did a whole thing and then like halfway through you're like, oh, I really think this would be better in first person. We don't have time for that in 9 days. So that can't happen. I recommend that you estimate the length of your story. So if you're thinking about what stories are, a short story is usually actually like 10,000 words, maybe 15,000 words max. A novella is going to be somewhere between like 15,000 and 50,000 words, and a novel will be 50,000 or more. Now keep in mind that from like a sales perspective, a book of about 25,000 sells at approximately the same price point in a lot of genres as a book of like 50,000 words. So like you might be thinking you really want to write the next great American novel, but actually if you write the novella and then, or maybe you write a novel, but like you split it into novellas, then you could potentially sell more. So this is something that we want to keep in mind. In terms of sort of what you want to do for the 9-day novella, if you are a beginner, I would plan for a short story. So I would plan for 10,000 words or less, and I wouldn't try to do any beyond that because 3,000 words a day then is going to be pretty ambitious. It's doable though. If you're sort of more intermediate, I would recommend 15,000 to 20,000. I target 20,000 myself. So like if I target 20,000, then I end up usually writing 25, and that gets me my novella. And I suppose if you are real seriously advanced and like fast, then you could go for, wow, my little arrows there are messed up. Ignore those arrows if you're looking at them online. If you're advanced, plan on a novella that is greater than 25,000. And if you're a beginner, plan for a short story that is less than 10,000 and try to pay no mind to my PowerPoint. And again, if you're here with me, we'll go through this in more detail in just a second here. And then lastly for today, so like once you got all that stuff figured out, then I recommend that you think about if you're a planner, a pantser, or a plantser. So meaning like, are you the kind of person who wants to do like all the outlining today? Like, do you need to name everybody and know all your plot points and be like all set on the research and like ready to roll tomorrow? Or are you the kind of person who pants? So do you want to know like nothing but like maybe like the genre and maybe that one sentence and then like sit on it? Or are you a plantser? I will tell you, so plantsers tend to be somewhere between planners and pantsers. I was like a die-hard planner most of my writing career, and I also could not finish anything when I was a planner. For whatever reason, planning slows me down. So I don't know. It doesn't do this for everyone. There are some people who do great planning their novels. For me, there's something about planning it out too far that makes it boring when I actually write. So it's like if I worked so hard on the plan, then I can't actually write the story. So I became a pantser for a while, and pantsing is how I was able to first finish something. And now I plants. So I do like a loose structure and a beat sheet, which is something that I will show you guys if you're here in the workshop. And if you are online, then I encourage you to look up beat sheets and figure out how those work, because they are really helpful little tools. And then, so if you are like thinking about planning today, so if you're online, here are some tips for you. If you're a planner, I recommend that you create a detailed outline of your story. You want to include the beginning, the rising action, the climax, the falling action. You should choose your main characters. So, lights, we're almost done with this slide. So you're going to pick sidekicks, main characters, villains. Thank you. Name them all, maybe do a short character sheet. You're going to pick your setting and do any necessary research. And then if you finish early, actually that was a joke. Ha ha, planners never finish early. Yeah. Okay, if you're a pantser, I'm glad you guys laughed. I didn't know if that was going to be funny. If you're a pantser, you want to choose your main characters, name them, and decide what their main problem and conflict is. And then, if you are a pantser, maybe create like an idea board. So like maybe like create some pictures or something for yourself that will inspire you. And after that, you can grab a beverage of your choice and chill, because you have done the work then. And then lastly, pantsers tip, if you're bored and like you finish really early, you could start looking at stock images for a cover, like maybe like get in a little extra work early. And if you are a plantser, then I'm going to recommend that you download a beat sheet and a template for Scrivener. Choose your main characters, name them, and decide what their main problem and conflict will be. And then write the blurb for your story, because if you write the blurb, then you've got a pretty good little path without doing absolutely everything in advance. And then if you have time left, do a little research on your setting so that you don't have to do it in the future. And then tomorrow we'll write, but don't do any writing today, because, I mean, unless you've got major stamina, 4 days of writing is really hard. So that is it. So if you are online, we are going to stop the streaming and start working, and I encourage you to do the same. If you need to contact me, here is how. And of course, if you are online, my other word stitch gal, Chloe, and I, we word sprint together every Monday from 4 to 6 Eastern. So join us again sometime. And I will also live stream tomorrow during our writing session. So thank you for joining us if you are online.